Pack, my tribe, welcome to Howling After Dark. Got a good show for you tonight. Especially if you haven't been listening to me for a while, or if you're new. I'm going to be recounting some of what I think are my listeners' favorite stories. Paranormal true crime. A lot of cool stories I've done in that particular kind of subgenre, I guess you could call it, over the years. Including some that I think that in some small way or another still affect most of us today. Things like the Black Dahlia murder out in Los Angeles in 1947, which we're going to get into in a little bit, or the Zodiac killings, which I honestly think that both can be attributed to the same guy, and we'll get into that too. As well as some iconic, I guess you could call it, crimes like the Jack the Ripper murders. And speaking of which, everybody in the paranormal community should have been absolutely ecstatic. And I don't know how this wasn't a bigger deal than it was. But they ID'd Jack the Ripper. We now know who Jack the Ripper was. His name was Aaron Kaczynski, or Kosminski, rather. And he was a Jewish immigrant living in London who was well known to be, well, for lack of a better way to put it, batshit crazy. He also had knowledge of a medical nature, which fits right into the profile of Jack the Ripper. But here's why people in the paranormal community should have been blowing this shit up, is because of the fact that months, and I mean months, almost a year before DNA evidence proved that Aaron Kosminski was in fact Jack the Ripper, he was originally ID'd as Aaron Kosminski on a fucking paranormal TV show called, what was it? Well, damn, what was that show? I'm having a total brain fart now. It was a short-lived show, too. Dang it. Hold on one sec. I'm going to look this up because it's going to bug me. Killer Instinct, I think, was the name of the show. No, that's not it either. Killer Contact was the name of the show. Um, yeah, the show Killer Contact, which, granted, like most paranormal TV shows, other than maybe Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters and stuff, uh, like a lot of the ones that came out, it didn't last very long, and there were issues with the show. But one thing that they should be able to brag about more than anything else is that they correctly, through their investigation at the Ten Bells Tavern in Whitechapel area of London, correctly identified Jack the Ripper nearly a year before DNA did. If that does not lend the paranormal field credibility, I don't think anything will. I mean, seriously, how much more could you possibly frickin' ask for? You realize that the paranormal community solved one of the biggest fucking mysteries on the planet. This short-lived TV show, Killer Contact, correctly solved the mystery of who the hell Jack the Ripper was damn near a year before DNA did. That's epic. And yet somehow nobody's talking about that. Oh, except for me. And maybe the guys that were in Killer Contact. But like as far as the paranormal community at large, nobody. It's like they. I don't know. I gotta say it. I love the paranormal community. I do, and I don't want this to get twisted. Like I'm sure like half of the stuff I've said have gotten twisted by this point. So I want to be very clear. This is not hatred towards the paranormal community. I love the paranormal community. But we've got a problem. Because we've got so many fucking idiots in our community that need to be weeded out, quite frankly. And these are the same people that are not talking about stuff like this. I'm just saying. And I want to say hello, by the way, to whoever's in chat. Welcome to the show. Anywho. Continuing on. But yeah, like I started, to be blunt about it, to be incredibly honest, the reason I started doing a paranormal true crime show is because Darkness Radio did it first. And they were kind of like, I guess you could say like my inspiration for doing my own show. In a lot of ways, and I give Dave Schrader and Mally Fox and all them guys, everybody over there, I give them a lot of props and a lot of respect. So yeah, I guess you could kind of technically say that I'm kind of copying them. By doing a paranormal true crime show, but I don't really care. But the thing is it's a great topic. I mean, there's so many places you can go with it. So I just like to charge head on, and Probably, I would say the first paranormal true crime show I did was the Black Dahlia. Um, and I think the Black Dahlia is one of those cases that, well, I mean, if you listen to modern day detectives in LA right now, that work cold cases and homicides, according to them, the Dahlia case will never be solved. Any physical evidence has decayed over time, and there's just not enough for them to go on. And I have absolute respect for these guys, by the way. Um, so I'm not taking anything away from them, but I kind of disagree, because I think honestly that the Black Dahlia case has been solved. We just don't. We just can't stamp solved on it because there's no physical evidence tying this dude in. But I am actually of the honest belief that Edward Wayne Edwards, who I've talked about before on my show, and a little refresher for those that don't know, Edward Wayne Edwards is an American serial killer. Well, he was convicted of killing, I think, 5 women, but it is believed by some, including myself, that he had a career, if you will, as a serial killer that spanned 66 years. And that, well, the first one he did. Actually, I'm gonna post something in chat here in a second. Let's see. I'm looking for, like, there's like an official site. Oh, here it is. This gentleman by the name of John Cameron, who's a retired detective, I believe, wrote a book called "It's Me, Edward Wayne Edwards, the Serial Killer You've Never Heard of." And here's that link for whoever's in chat. He wrote this book about him, and he theorizes, and it is a theory because Edward Wayne Edwards is now dead and therefore it can't be proved. But it is theorized that he is responsible for, among others, the Black Dahlia, the Zodiac killings, the killings that the West Memphis 3 was convicted of, the John Benet Ramsey murder, and let's see, let me find it real quick. His first killing. Oh, and it's also believed that he was the Zodiac, by the way. So, I mean, if there is any truth to this at all, this guy is the most prolific serial killer that ever existed, and probably one of the smartest, which we do believe, definitely, because of the fact that, like with the West Memphis 3, he always kind of very subtly planted evidence that pointed at somebody else. but I'm looking for something here. I believe his first killing was in the 1930s. Um, should be a timeline here somewhere. Here we go. Yes, his first killing was in 1933. He was... Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, 1933. He was, I think, 13 at the time. And that was right here in Akron, Ohio, by the way. But it all started with this this whole thing I did on Elizabeth Short, because originally there was another theory about who killed the Black Dahlia. Another gentleman who himself was a retired police officer believes that his father was the one that killed the Black Dahlia. His father was a surgeon, by the way. And so, like, a lot of what he said made sense. And I think his father did kill some people, but I do kind of agree that it's Edward Wayne Edwards. Because like all the killings that we know he did are pretty much the same MO. I mean, because let's get into the Black Dahlia, and then I'll talk about the cases that Edwards was actually convicted of. On January 15th, 1947, a housewife named Betty Bersinger left her home on Norton Avenue in Leimert Park section of Los Angeles, bound for a shoe repair shop. She took her 3-year-old daughter with her, and as they walked along the street coming up on the corner of Norton and 39th, they passed by several vacant lots that were overgrown with weeds. She couldn't help but feel a little depressed as she looked out over the deserted area. Development had been halted here thanks to the war, and the open lots had been left looking abandoned and eerie. Betty felt slightly disconcerted and then shrugged it off, blaming her emotional state on the gray skies and the cold, dreary morning. As she walked a little further along, she caught a glimpse of something white over in the weeds. She was not surprised. It wasn't uncommon for people to toss their garbage out into the vacant lot, and this time it looked as though someone had left a broken department store mannequin here. The dummy had been shattered, and the two halves lay separated from one another, with the bottom half lying twisted into what was admittedly a macabre pose. Who would throw such a thing into an empty lot? Betty shook her head and walked on, but then found her glance pulled back to the ghostly white mannequin. She looked again and then realized that this was no department store dummy at all. It was the severed body of a woman. With a sharp intake of breath and a stifled scream, she took her daughter away from the gruesome sight and ran to a nearby house. From here, she telephoned the police. The call was answered by Officer Frank Perkins and Will Fitzgerald, who arrived within minutes. When they found the naked body of a woman who had been cut in half, they immediately called for assistance. The dead woman, it was noted, seemed to have been posed. She was lying on her back with her arms raised over her shoulders and her legs spread in an obscene imitation of seductiveness. Cuts and abrasions covered her body, and her mouth had been slashed so that her smile extended from ear to ear. There were rope marks on her wrist, ankles, and neck, and investigators later surmised that she had been tied down and tortured for several days. Worst of all was the fact that she had been sliced cleanly in two just above the waist. It was clear that she had been killed somewhere else and then dumped in the vacant lot overnight. There was no blood on her body and none on the ground where she had been left. The killer had washed her off before bringing her to the dump site. The horrible nature of the case made it a top priority for the LAPD captain, John Donahoe, assigned a senior detective to the case, Detective Sergeant Harry Hansen, and his partner, Finis Brown. Okay, now I'm going to interject something here that they have not said in this article. And it hasn't really been talked about. Everybody seems to focus on Betty Short, Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. Because I think that's when things really kind of blew up. But she was not the first in LA to die in this manner. She was not the first victim of this particular killer, assuming it was somebody other than Edward Wayne Edwards. This was not the first victim, and it definitely was not the last. There were several. Much like with Jack the Ripper, this guy was sending taunting letters into the newspapers and into the police department, taunting the police, and much like with Jack the Ripper, he wasn't caught. Nobody knows for certain who this killer was. But you can even look into it. At the same time all of this was going on, there was another killer that they called the Werewolf. Which, for reasons I'm not going to get into, I kind of take offense to, because werewolves are cool and whoever this fucker is wasn't. Simple as that. But I digress. So it says here, by the time detectives were contacted and get on the scene, it was swarming with reporters. That much we do know because it's like historical fact. It was swarming with reporters and photographers and a crowd of curiosity seekers. Hansen was furious that bystanders and even careless police personnel were trampling the crime scene. Yeah, that's something I gotta say. This case was mishandled from the get-go, which is partially the reason I think it hasn't been solved. Anyways. Evidence was being destroyed, he knew, and he immediately cleared the area. Then, while he and his partner examined the scene, the body of the woman was taken to the Los Angeles County morgue Her fingerprints were lifted, and with the help of the assistant managing editor of the Los Angeles Examiner, which is a newspaper no longer in existence, by the way, in exchange for information, the prints were sent to the FBI in Washington using the newspaper's sound photo equipment. Meanwhile, an examination of the body was started by the coroner's office. It began to detail an incredible and horrifying variety of wounds to the young woman's body. Although the official cause of death was hemorrhage and shock due to concussion of the brain and lacerations of the face. An autopsy revealed multiple lacerations to the face and head, along with the severing of the victim's body. There was no sperm present on the body, and most of the damage appeared to have been done after she was dead. Even the hardened doctors and detectives were shocked at the state of the girl's corpse. Shortly after receiving the fingerprints, the FBI had a match for the LA detectives. The victim of the brutal murder was Elizabeth Short, a 22-year-old who originally came from Massachusetts during World War II. She had been at a cork at Camp Cook in California, which explained why her fingerprints were on file. And it goes on and on and on about the investigation. But the other suspect, other than Edwards, is detailed in a book called Black Dahlia Avenger, which was written by this retired cop who believes that that his father, it was written by Steve Hodel. He believes that his father, George Hodel, was the one who killed the Black Dahlia. And there is a lot of evidence to suggest that that his father did actually kill other women. But here's his link if you want to read more about it. I'm going to post this in our chat. Now, it is believed that Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, haunts a couple of different places. One of which is the Brown Derby, where she was known to hang out. Brown Derby was a club in LA. It's still there. It's like a restaurant / nightclub kind of place. But also the Cecil Hotel, which is ironically also where not one but two different serial killers had lived at one point. One of which was Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. It's also been the place of mysterious deaths and hauntings pretty much ever since. But other places that have interesting history uh, aren't all in the United States. The Ten Bells Pub, which is on Commercial Street in the Whitechapel district of London, was known to be a favorite haunt, no pun intended, of most of, if not all of, the victims of Jack the Ripper. The Ten Bells Pub is indelibly linked with the legend of Jack the Ripper. Its interior resplendent with a magnificent tiled wall panel depicting the days when this area was countryside outside the city of London has hardly changed since the early hours of November 9th, 1888, when Mary Keller, Jack the Ripper's final victim, left the pub. Her horrifically mutilated body was discovered the next morning in Miller's Court of Dorset Street, which is another pub, by the way, right across the street from the Ten Bells, which has since been renamed a couple times, and we'll get into that. On the opposite side of the road from the Ten Bells, indeed for many years in the 1970s and 80s, the pub was renamed Jack the Ripper, until thanks largely to a landlord who was tastefully selling dark red Ripper tipples, the brewery decided to return to its original name in 1989. In the late 1990s, live-in staff whose bedrooms were on the upper floors of the building were complaining of alarming encounters with a ghostly old man dressed in Victorian clothing. They would often be awoken by an uneasy feeling in the dead of night, and turning over, find his phantom form lying beside them on the bed. No sooner would they cry out in shock than the figure would disappear. Staff with no previous knowledge of this ghost would often report seeing him, and their descriptions would always be the same. Nobody had any idea who he was, and those who had occasion to live on the premises learnt to just accept him as the oldest resident. In June of 2000, however, a new landlord took over the pub and decided to clear out the cellar. He found an old metal box hidden away in a corner, and opening it, discovered it contained the personal effects of a man named George Roberts. The items dated from the early 1900s, and with them was a brown leather wallet, inside which was a press cutting of the same period that talked of his having been murdered with an axe in a Swansea cinema. Further research revealed that a man named George Roberts had indeed kept the pub in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the landlord concluded that it was his ghost from whom staff had been encountering. A tenant who lived on the premises in 2001 would often hear footsteps followed by a faint peal of laughter outside his door, even when he was the only person on the premises. Whenever he went to investigate, he would find the corridor outside empty. Going down into the bar to investigate further, he would often be pushed hard on the back by an invisible hand. The psychic was once brought to the pub to see what she could pick up on the premises. Having reached the top floor, she paused outside on the rooms and refused to go any further. She said that she could sense that something terrible had happened in the room, and was almost certain that it involved the brutal death of a baby in the 19th century. Uh, Lindsay Saviter, a leading researcher and expert on the Jack the Ripper crimes, was being shown around the pub a few years later and had been allowed access to the roof space. She had noticed some material embedded in the floor behind the water tank, and pulling at it found it was a sack tied at the top. Opening it, she found it contained a moldy set of Victorian baby clothes that appeared to have been slashed with a knife. Intriguingly, the tank was directly over the room that the psychic had refused to enter. That's just crazy. And it's crazy. But yeah, that building, like I was saying at the top of the show, that's actually the place where those Killer Contact people were for that TV show, Killer Contact. When they discovered correctly, once again, that Aaron Kosminski was in fact Jack the Ripper. And once again, almost a year before DNA proved it. Hey, I'm just saying, like, hold on, I'm checking something. But yeah, I'm just saying, you know, it is what it is. I mean, it's a fact. It is just a fact. These guys discovered who Jack the Ripper was a year before DNA did. If that does not get more people on board with the paranormal, nothing will. Nothing will. And hi, by the way, to whoever is in chat. Nice to see you. You know, another friend of mine, by the way. This is kind of off topic. Another friend of mine does a paranormal show, and I've actually had him on the show before. He's a funny guy. His name is Jason Olivo. I like to call him my favorite Mexican. But yeah, there's kind of a joke there. Anyways, I had him on the show before. You can find my old episodes on Spreaker. It's the one called Texas Ghost Hunter. And on his show, there's people that will enter his chat and they'll just sign on as guest or whatever, and won't have like an actual name. And he calls them his ninja contingent. I call you ghosts. So, welcome, ghost, whoever you are. Oh, okay, it's Leon. Hey, Leon, nice to see you. We've got about 2 minutes left in this session, but don't go anywhere. where I will be right back with part 2 of tonight's show. That's kind of how we have to do things here, because Spreaker only allows me 45 minutes of broadcast time at a time. So yeah, just don't go anywhere when this knocks off. I'll be right back. But anyways, continuing on, and kind of going back to Edward Wayne Edwards, by the way. It's theorized, I should say anyway, to have been killing since he was 13. His first being in 1933. Or no, I think I may be wrong about that. I think he was born in 1933. 1940. Wait, hold on. Let me find this out. This whole timeline is confusing me. He commits his first known murders at age 13. In the Sandusky area. Or no, in the Cleveland area. The first was in 1945. He murdered 43-year-old Josephine Ross, who was stabbed, throat slit, and placed in a bathtub. Body was washed and adhesive tape placed on wounds of the body. Then again in December 11 of 1945, murder of Frances Brown, shot to the head, stabbed, post-mortem, placed in a bathtub, body wash, adhesive tape placed on wounds, and a lipstick message left on the wall. One of the things that was very, very kind of like that really stood out about the Black Dahlia was that there was a lipstick message written on the body. So we can see there where he started that. And that was in Chicago, Illinois, by the way. Just a few years later, he was in, guess where? That's right, California. Before we get to that, January 6th through the 7th in Chicago, Illinois, he was only 12 by this point. Edwards had killed